This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi.
All right, let's dive into the legal maze that is the Vance Bolter case. Because this thing is more complicated than a pretzel factory. We've got a guy who dressed up as a cop, murdered a state representative and her husband, tried to kill a senator and his wife, and had a hit list longer than most of our grocery store receipts. But here's where it gets really interesting from a legal standpoint. Bolter's facing both state and federal charges. Now, if you're thinking, isn't that double jeopardy? It's not. Welcome to the wonderful world of dual sovereignty, where you can get tag teamed by both Uncle Sam and your state government for the same crime. It's like getting grounded by both parents, except instead you're losing your Xbox privileges, you might lose your life. See, Minnesota abolished the death penalty in 1911. They were like, you know what? We're too nice for executions. You know, we don't want to kill anybody. So we're just going to say, no more killing the bad guys, you know? Okay. Oh, yeah. You want some of that, got to get to the church basement. They're going to have that lutefisk and lefse. It's going to be good. Yep, it's going to be good. Yep. Don't you know? Something like that. The feds, though, they're like, we don't want any lutefisk. We want to kill that asshole. That's how they talk. The feds don't care about Minnesota nice. They're looking at this case and seeing terrorism, interstate commerce violations, and a whole buffet of federal crimes that come with the side of lethal injection. And it might be called Buffett, depending on where you're at. But before we get into all of that legal chess, let's talk about what we haven't covered yet. The money trail. Bolter owned, this is the fun part of this whole thing, Praetorian Guard Security Services. And yes, that name should have been a red flag. Number one, if you know what that is, it's not some broke extremist living in his mom's basement. The guy had 7 vehicles, owned his home outright, and somehow still qualified for a public defender by claiming he only made $540 a week. And the name of that business, it's a representation of, I believe it was Roman guards. And what they did was, they got so close to the emperors they were protecting, they started offing them and then putting their own in their place. Kind of a weird name for a business, considering what happened. Anyway, creative accounting to get the public defender. Then there's the timeline that nobody's talking about between his last victim at 3:35 a.m. and his capture 43 hours later. Bolter just went home. No dramatic escape plan, no shootout, just a middle-aged guy hiding in a field near his house. Like he was playing the world's worst game of hide and seek. And can we talk about the evidence for a second? This guy left more breadcrumbs than Hansel and Gretel. Notebooks full of surveillance notes, a letter to the FBI signed with a fake doctorate, text messages to his family. It's like he wanted to get caught, except he had tried to run, except he also didn't run very far. Make it make sense. The legal implications here are staggering. We're not just talking about murder charges. We're talking about domestic terrorism. Yeah. Interstate stalking, civil rights violations, and enough federal charges to keep lawyers busy until the next ice age. So we've brought in Eric Faddis, defense attorney and former prosecutor, to help us untangle this insane legal knot. Eric's seen both sides of the courtroom. And if anyone can help us explain all of this, how you prosecute or defend a case this complex, it's him. Eric, let me ask you, we've got these parallel prosecutions happening, federal and state. How does this even work?
Yeah, Tony. So there's something, called the dual sovereignty doctrine, whereby the federal government can prosecute somebody for a crime in parallel and at the same time as the state government. And so really what will happen is these two cases will sort of move along in parallel, but they have different considerations, different potential penalties, possibly even different outcomes. And so it gets a little bit confusing and complicated, but there are strategic reasons why the government would do that.
We obviously have the chance at that then. Federal prosecutors considering the capital punishment for the crimes. Would this case be tried in Minnesota, even if it's a I say they don't have capital punishment there, but could it happen in Minnesota and still get a death penalty as the verdict in this?
Yes. So the federal proceedings can happen on the federal level of Minnesota's court system, not the state level. And so at that federal level, certainly the death penalty is still on the table. It seems like that's probably the reason why the government chose to bring not only state charges, but also federal charges. And so, yeah, that case would move along. There would be different investigative agencies involved, but really one also comprehensive sort of attack on Bolter from the government regarding these alleged crimes.
The big question I think a lot of people want to know, could there be more people involved in this? Rightfully so. He sent a really weird text to his family right before all this went down. Daddy is going to war tonight is basically what it said. And there was also a note that he might not be alive much longer. Interesting thing to say. One would assume maybe he's planning on going out in some sort of blaze of glory in his mind, but he was arrested, without any sort of incident. There's going to be a lot of things that are looked into, and one of the big things is what did the wife and the family know, and when did they know it, if anything at all? They did catch her driving the other day with passports, guns, money in the car, a little suspicious there. But I have to say, too, if you just found out that your spouse did this horrible, horrible crime and you had no idea, I might be wanting to leave the country, too. Not to be suspicious, but just to get the hell away from the onslaught of torturous press that's going to be coming my way. What do you think they're looking at behind the scenes right now with the family? Let's start there.
Yeah, Tony, some curious circumstances that the wife found herself in when she was contacted by authorities. Like you said, it could be that she had knowledge of what was going to happen, and the real question legally becomes, what did she do with that knowledge? Did she provide some kind of affirmative assistance? Did she provide some sort of impediment to law enforcement to ultimately discovering these alleged crimes of her husband? If so, she could be on the hook for something like accessory after the fact or obstruction or even possibly complicity. On the other hand, if she was just trying to get the heck out of Dodge and even if she had knowledge but didn't help Bolter in any way, that is probably not a criminal act and probably not something for which she can be prosecuted.
So theoretically here, let's just play the what ifs right now. If she had knowledge that her husband was an extremist, let's just play this situation, that he's really into this stuff, maybe she doesn't necessarily know exactly that he's going to carry something like this out, but says, horrible things around the house every now and then. They should die, whatever. I'm just, again, pure hypothetical. She goes to the authorities right now and just says, spills her guts. Here's everything he's been saying. I'm just the wife. He's been saying crazy things. I wouldn't know if he was serious or not. Does that absolve her of any sort of responsibility, just knowing that her significant other was out there? She didn't say something when she saw something. But again, that's not always the easiest thing to do because people do spout off.
Totally. And legally speaking, in most states, a person who has information about a crime that's going to happen does not necessarily have an affirmative obligation to go to police and tell them about it and to thwart that crime. There are exceptions for that, for like mandatory reporters and things like that. But here, if she did do that and kind of spilled her guts, that would not constitute a crime. Now, it would subject her to significant further interrogation, and they would probably be able to access her phone records, computer records after such a statement was made, and do those records further implicate her in any possible way they could. So it's kind of a tricky measure. Perhaps the person wants to come forward and give information, but they're also taking a risk in doing so, even when they did nothing wrong.
What if she did know something? What if she did have knowledge? Yeah. Let's just say she had knowledge. Again, another scenario. Not saying she did. This is just scenario, and we're cosplaying this horrible situation. We have to wear outfits now. So hang on. Let me get. No, kidding. No. Let's say she did know that he was going to do something like this. Who knows if she knew the date, the time, whatever it may be. If she came forward now and said, look, I thought he was full of shit. He was saying he was going to do that. I mean, is the best option right now for her to just get in front of this as quickly as she can, if she had any sort of knowledge whatsoever, and just say, look, I'm the innocent spouse here. Says crazy things. This happened, obviously. What's her, if you're advising this woman right now, what are you telling her to do?
Yeah, there's a balance of interests here, because on the one hand, you could advise her to come forward, completely spill her guts, tell everything she knows about him and what his purported plans could have been. And perhaps that insulates her. Perhaps the government says, hey, if there was any crime you committed, we'll give you immunity so long as you testify against your husband. That's one course of action. But like I said, that could open her up to some risk. There could be something buried in her text messages or emails that looks not good. And that wouldn't be good in a nationally publicized case. On the other hand, if she just shuts up, that would maybe insulate her from further legal interrogation. But it also looks pretty darn shady. And she could have public condemnation because of that. So it'd be a really difficult advisement to give.
There's not a great path here forward for her unless she knows absolutely nothing. That would be the best thing. And it's a difference between knowing your husband has a lot of extreme political beliefs and then also sympathizing with him. If you're sitting there going back and forth on this, yes, honey, that might be a little different. To compare it to another case where a spouse goes off and does crazy things, allegedly, Rex Heuermann and Asa Elrup, she filed for divorce, but we learned in the new documentary that came out that she still loves him. She thinks he's innocent. She got divorced for protecting the assets of the family and the kids. Is that an option? Would that protect the assets if she were to get divorced at this point? It also might open her up then to not having the spousal privilege and not having to testify against your husband. So kind of a double-edged sword there. Again, what would you say as an attorney to someone who's like, here's where I'm at. What should I do?
Yeah, a lot of considerations to weigh there because, like you said, the divorce could signal some detachment from Bolter and his alleged acts and possibly protect assets going forward. I don't know the constitution of their family, but if there were children, it could help protect that kind of thing. On the other hand, yes, spousal privilege usually only applies to someone who is presently your partner. And so if they get divorced, she can probably be called to testify as a witness against him down the road. And so while she might protect assets in doing so, she might expose herself to risk and just a really unpleasant ongoing legal proceeding with this, multi-murderer allegedly.
If she wants nothing to do with him, if she's like, okay, this is insane. I want out of this. I don't sympathize with you. I think you're nuts. You've ruined our lives. You've ruined your life. Would that be the best bet? Just get the divorce. And if you have no problem testifying against him, just protect. I mean, could they still go after any of those assets considering they were part of his at the time of the crimes?
Yes. So my understanding is he had multiple vehicles. He had a home, so he did have some assets. And usually when there is a death, those assets can be attached in the criminal and the civil context. And it usually applies to assets that were in existence at the time that the judgment is rendered. So that's going to be down the road. That's going to be a restitution order in a criminal case or a judgment in a civil case. And so assets that existed at the time of the marriage are significant, but it's really going to matter what assets are still marital property once those judgments come down. So if she gets the divorce, I think it could legally protect the significant majority of those assets.
Yeah, I mean, we always look at like, well, how are we going to punish the guy who did this stuff? You got to think too about like the family, like because their lives are destroyed too. And I mean, it may seem somewhat selfish because people did just lose their lives, but at the same point, if you had nothing to do with it, you do have to protect your life too from the monster that it's destroyed these people's lives and your own? So these are interesting questions, I think, that a lot of people may not know the logistics of, because it is just so kind of up in the air. Eric Faddis, fascinating stuff as always. The legal gymnastics in this case are mind-boggling. You know what we didn't get to talk about that's also been bugging me on this case? The competency angle. Here's a guy who planned attacks across 6 states, created elaborate disguises, conducted months of surveillance, but then texts his family, Dad went to war. Like he's announcing a grocery run. Anybody want anything from the Safeway? Jimmy, do you want those salt and vinegar Pringles? Okay. Is he crazy like a fox? Or is he just bad at being a criminal mastermind? Because let's be real, the insanity defense is probably off the table. You don't accidentally create a 45-person hit list. You don't mistakenly buy 3 AK-47s. And you definitely don't unconsciously surveil your victims for months while serving on a board with one of them. That's not mental illness. That's methodology. But here's what really gets me about the wife situation Eric brought up. She's caught between the ultimate rock and a hard place. If she knew nothing, she's still screwed because nobody's going to believe the wife of a political assassin was completely in the dark. If she knew something, she's potentially facing charges. And if she tries to protect assets for her family's future, she looks like she's profiting or protecting a murderer. There's no winning moves here for this woman, especially if she had absolutely nothing to do with this. I can't feel sorry enough for her. What about the civil suits that are coming? Because, they're coming. The victims' families going to go after every asset Bolter ever touched. That security company, that's gone. 7 vehicles auctioned. The house, new owners. His family isn't just losing a father and husband. They're losing everything. The precedent this case sets is huge. If the feds get their death penalty conviction in Minnesota, what message does that send? The state sovereignty only matters until the federal government decides it doesn't. But this does happen in many places, even though people tend to forget history sometimes. It's a constitutional can of worms. And we still don't know if others were involved. That text about not wanting to implicate anybody, what does that mean? Is he protecting accomplices, or is it just paranoid ramblings? People in his head. The fact that his family had passports and cash suggests something. Is it preparation? Is it, oh my God, Dad just did this, let's get our go bags and run? A preparation for what? Fleeing, hiding, or were they just as shocked as everyone else and trying to escape the media circus? That's what I'd probably be doing. This case is going to be studied in law schools for decades. Multiple jurisdictions, conflicting laws, questions of mental state, religious extremism as a defense or an aggravating factor, and the death penalty is in place in an abolitionist state. It's got everything except simplicity. Vance Bolter wanted to start a war. Well, he's got one. Except instead of Democrats versus Republicans, it's going to be prosecutors versus defense attorneys, federal versus state, and ultimately, justice versus revenge. When the dust settles here and the appeals are exhausted, what will we have learned? How do we prevent the next Bolter? Because somewhere out there, someone else is making a list. We better figure out who they are before they decide to go to war, too. Tell me what you think in the comments section on YouTube. If you're listening to us wherever it may be sure to press subscribe so you don't miss any of the cases we're covering for you right here at the Hidden Killers Podcast and True Crime Today. I'm Tony Bruschi. We'll talk again real soon.
Craving non-stop true crime updates? Press subscribe now and get the latest cases, analysis, and expert commentary delivered straight to your feed. Only from the Hidden Killers Podcast and True Crime Today.